At Mom's funeral, my sister-in-law Jessica whispered to her mother, "Finally, Maria is gone." I convinced Tony to get power of attorney months ago. The house, the savings, everything is ours now. Derek and his sister get nothing. She'd been manipulating my 76-year-old mother during her final months with cancer. But Jessica had made one critical mistake. She assumed I wouldn't be recording family conversations during Mom's illness. The evidence I'd gathered would prove that she stole our inheritance and expose the financial elder abuse that destroyed my mother's final wishes. My name is Derek Castellano, 39 years old, and I'm a criminal defense attorney from Boston, Massachusetts. 4 years ago, I thought my biggest challenge was balancing a demanding legal practice with helping my beloved mother battle stage 4 pancreatic cancer, while ensuring her final wishes were respected and legally protected. I had no idea that my brother's wife was systematically manipulating Mom's vulnerable state to steal the inheritance she'd spent her entire life planning to leave her children. The story begins 5 years ago when my mother, Maria Castellano, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer at age 75, after months of concerning symptoms that we'd initially attributed to normal aging and stress. Mom had been the undisputed matriarch of our traditional Italian-American family for decades, a remarkably strong woman who'd raised 4 children while working alongside my father to build a successful restaurant business in Boston's historic North End neighborhood. After Dad, Salvatore Castellano, died from a heart attack 5 years earlier, Mom had lived independently in the family home while carefully managing the substantial assets he'd left behind. She took immense pride in maintaining the financial legacy that Dad had worked 60 years to build, and she was determined to preserve every dollar for the children and grandchildren who represented the future of our family name. Mom's estate was substantial for a working-class immigrant family who'd built their wealth through decades of hard work and careful saving. The restaurant building that housed Sal's kitchen was worth approximately $800,000, having appreciated significantly since Dad purchased it in 1978. There was $400,000 in savings and investment accounts that represented profits from the restaurant plus Social Security and pension funds that Mom had managed conservatively. The family home in Revere was valued at $350,000, and there were additional assets including life insurance policies, jewelry, and family heirlooms that brought the total estate value to nearly $1.6 million. Dad had worked from age 14 until his death at 78, starting as a dishwasher in other people's restaurants, and eventually building Sal's Kitchen into one of the most beloved family dining establishments in Boston. Mom had been his equal partner in every aspect of the business, managing finances, supervising staff, and ensuring that every customer felt like family when they entered their restaurant. The family dynamics became increasingly complicated when my older brother Tony married Jessica Romano 4 years ago, just 1 year after Dad's death when Mom was still grieving and vulnerable to people who offered companionship and support. Jessica was 34, recently divorced with 2 young children from her previous marriage, and everything our traditional Italian family values weren't. Flashy, materialistic, obsessed with money and status rather than family loyalty and generosity. Jessica had targeted Tony specifically because of his obvious connection to the family business and Mom's substantial assets. She'd researched our family through social media and mutual acquaintances, learning about the restaurant's success and Mom's financial security before engineering their introduction at a community event, where she positioned herself as a struggling single mother who needed Tony's help and protection. Tony, 42, had always been the most emotionally vulnerable and easily manipulated of Mom's 4 children. He'd struggled with gambling addiction and alcohol abuse during his 30s, problems that had cost him his first marriage and created ongoing financial difficulties that made him particularly susceptible to someone who promised stability and security. Jessica recognized his emotional weaknesses and exploited them systematically. My sisters, Angela and Sophia, ages 44 and 41 respectively, had both inherited our parents' strong work ethic and financial wisdom. Angela managed the restaurant's daily operations, while Sophia handled marketing and customer relations, ensuring that Sal's kitchen continued thriving despite Dad's death. I provided legal services for the family business while maintaining my criminal defense practice, helping navigate regulations and contracts that protected our interests. Within months of marrying Tony, Jessica began positioning herself as Mom's primary caregiver and advocate, moving her 2 children into Mom's house under the guise of helping with expenses and providing companionship. She gradually took control of Mom's daily routine, medical appointments, and social connections with longtime friends who'd been part of our family's support network for decades. Jessica immediately demonstrated sophisticated knowledge about estate planning, inheritance taxes, and asset protection strategies that seemed completely inconsistent with her claimed background as a retail store manager. She'd ask detailed questions about the restaurant's financial performance, property values, and investment portfolios with the intensity and expertise of someone who'd studied these topics extensively. Most concerning was Jessica's systematic approach to isolating Mom from her other children and longtime family friends. She convinced Mom that family gatherings were too overwhelming for someone with cancer, that business discussions about the restaurant were too stressful for her condition, and that visits from friends were too tiring and should be limited to protect her health and energy. Your mother needs to focus all her energy on fighting this cancer, Jessica would say with practiced concern whenever we tried to include Mom in family discussions or social activities. All this stress about business and family drama is just making her sicker. She needs peace and quiet to heal properly. I began documenting Jessica's behavior and suspicious activities because my legal training had taught me to recognize patterns of manipulation and financial exploitation that often target elderly people with serious illnesses. I'd handled several cases involving elder abuse and knew that cancer patients were particularly vulnerable to people who exploited their fear and dependency. I installed discreet recording equipment in Mom's home office and common living areas, positioning them as security measures but actually designing them to capture conversations about Jessica's real intentions and activities. Massachusetts is a one-party consent state for recording conversations, so I could legally document any discussions I participated in or overheard in family settings. As a criminal defense attorney specializing in white-collar crime, I understood the critical importance of building comprehensive, irrefutable evidence before confronting someone I suspected of systematic financial exploitation. I needed to document not just Jessica's actions but also her motivations and coordination with any accomplices who might be helping her manipulate Mom's legal and financial decisions. The recordings quickly revealed Jessica's true character and the scope of her scheme to steal Mom's inheritance through systematic manipulation of her cancer diagnosis and treatment process. She spoke completely differently when she thought Mom couldn't hear clearly, complaining bitterly about having to babysit the old lady and making detailed plans for spending her anticipated inheritance on a larger house, private schools for her children, and luxury items she'd never been able to afford. In recorded conversations with Tony, Jessica discussed sophisticated strategies for convincing Mom to change her will and estate planning to benefit them exclusively while minimizing what my sisters and I would inherit. She'd clearly researched legal procedures that allowed family members to gain control over elderly relatives' finances and understood how to exploit Mom's medical vulnerability for maximum financial advantage. "Your mother is never going to get better, Tony," Jessica said during one particularly cold conversation I recorded in Mom's kitchen. "This cancer is going to kill her within a year, and we need to make sure she understands who's been taking care of her. Your brother and sisters visit when it's convenient, but we're here every day dealing with her needs." Most damaging were Jessica's recorded conversations with Frank Martinelli, a corrupt estate planning attorney who specialized in manipulating elderly clients into changing their wills under circumstances that would be difficult to challenge in probate court. Their discussions revealed a sophisticated scheme to document Mom's supposed mental decline, while pressuring her to sign documents that would transfer most of her assets to Tony and Jessica. We need to establish a clear timeline showing that Maria's cancer has affected her cognitive abilities, Martinelli explained during a conversation I recorded when he visited Mom's house. If we can document confusion and dependency, any changes she makes to her estate planning will be much harder for the other children to challenge legally. Jessica's response revealed both her callousness and her criminal sophistication. That's easy. I can create situations where she seems confused and document them with photos and written statements. The medication makes her groggy anyway, so it's just a matter of timing when we ask her to sign things. But Jessica's most elaborate scheme involved manipulating Mom's relationship with her longtime physician, Dr. Raymond Chen, who had been treating our family for over 20 years. Jessica convinced Mom that Dr. Chen was too old-fashioned and didn't understand modern cancer treatments, persuading her to switch to a new oncologist who would be more likely to support Jessica's narrative about Mom's declining mental capacity. The new doctor, Dr. Patricia Williams, had a concerning history of over-medicating elderly patients and providing questionable assessments of their mental competency for legal purposes. Jessica had specifically researched and selected Dr. Williams because of her willingness to provide medical documentation that would support estate planning changes for elderly patients with cancer. Under Dr. Williams's care, Mom's pain medication was significantly increased, and she was prescribed additional drugs for anxiety and depression that made her drowsy and confused during important conversations about legal and financial matters. Jessica carefully timed her discussions about estate planning for periods when Mom was most affected by this excessive medication. The systematic drugging made Mom appear increasingly frail and mentally compromised, exactly the condition that Jessica needed to justify major changes to estate planning that Mom would never have agreed to while mentally alert and physically strong. Jessica documented Mom's medicated confusion with photos and written statements that would support her claims about cognitive decline. Jessica also began manipulating Mom's perception of her other children's care and attention. She would schedule Mom's medical appointments when my sisters and I were working, then tell Mom that we were too busy to attend. She'd intercept phone calls and messages, claiming that we didn't want to be bothered with Mom's health problems, creating the impression that only she and Tony cared about Mom's well-being. Derek and the girls have their own lives now, Jessica would tell Mom during her most vulnerable moments. They don't really understand what it's like to deal with cancer every day. Tony and I are the only ones who truly care about making sure you're comfortable and taken care of properly. The manipulation became even more sophisticated when Jessica began researching Mom's deepest fears about death and dying, then exploiting those fears to pressure her into making estate planning decisions that would benefit Jessica's family. She convinced Mom that her other children would fight over the inheritance and destroy the family unity that had always been Mom's highest priority. "You don't want your children fighting over money after you're gone, do you, Maria?" Jessica would say during Mom's weakest moments. "If you leave everything to Tony and me, we'll make sure everyone gets what they need without any legal battles or family conflicts. We can be the trustees who keep the family together." Jessica's scheme accelerated dramatically when Mom's cancer progressed to stage 4, and her prognosis became terminal. The knowledge that Mom had limited time remaining triggered Jessica to implement the most aggressive phase of her inheritance theft plan, including bringing Martinelli to the hospital with documents that would transfer virtually all of Mom's assets to Tony and Jessica. The breakthrough in my investigation came when I recorded Jessica's phone conversation with Martinelli about their timeline for getting Mom to sign the fraudulent estate planning documents. "Maria's getting worse faster than we expected," Jessica said with obvious urgency. "The doctors say she might only have weeks left, so we need to get the new will signed before she becomes too confused to cooperate, or before her other children get suspicious about what we're doing." Martinelli's response revealed the full criminal nature of their conspiracy. "Don't worry, Jessica. The power of attorney documents that Tony signed give you legal authority to make decisions for Mariah when she's incapacitated. Even if the other kids challenge the will later, we have medical documentation from Dr. Williams that supports the changes she supposedly wanted to make." But Jessica and Martinelli had made several critical mistakes that would ultimately destroy their inheritance theft scheme and expose them to serious criminal charges that neither had anticipated. First, they hadn't realized that I'd been independently monitoring Mom's medical care through Dr. Chen, who confirmed that she remained mentally competent despite her physical decline from cancer. Second, the power of attorney documents they'd convinced Tony to help Mom sign were legally flawed because they'd been executed under circumstances that constituted fraud and undue influence. Mom had signed them while heavily medicated after chemotherapy sessions, believing they were routine medical authorizations rather than legal documents that would give Jessica control over her finances. Third, I'd been systematically documenting every interaction between Jessica and Mom, creating a comprehensive record that proved Jessica had been manipulating a vulnerable elderly woman with terminal cancer for purely financial gain. The recordings included Jessica's own admissions about her scheme and her coordination with Martinelli to defraud Mom's estate. The confrontation came when Mom's oncologist informed our family that she had only days or weeks remaining to live. Jessica immediately implemented the final phase of her scheme, bringing Martinelli to the hospital with documents that would transfer all of Mom's assets to Tony and Jessica, while leaving my sisters and me with minimal token bequests that wouldn't reflect Mom's actual wishes. Mom was heavily sedated and confused from increased pain medication when Jessica and Martinelli arrived with the fraudulent will for her signature. Jessica claimed the documents were just routine legal updates that the doctors had requested for medical decision-making purposes, but I could see they were comprehensive estate planning changes that violated everything Mom had told us about her intentions for her inheritance. I immediately interrupted the signing session and demanded to review all documents before Mom signed anything that could affect her estate or medical care. Martinelli claimed they were confidential attorney-client communications that didn't require family input, but I insisted on my right as Mom's son and a practicing attorney to protect her interests from the potential exploitation. When I examined the proposed will changes, I discovered that they would leave the restaurant building, family home, and savings almost entirely to Tony and Jessica, with my sisters and me receiving only $15,000 each and some personal items. This distribution was completely contrary to Mom's frequently stated wishes to divide her assets equally among all 4 of her children, as she and Dad had planned together for decades. I immediately contacted hospital administration and demanded that all legal document signing be suspended until Mom's mental capacity could be properly evaluated by independent medical professionals who weren't connected to Jessica's scheme. I also called Adult Protective Services to report suspected elder abuse and financial exploitation of a vulnerable cancer patient.